and that we need a better future, and that's what we want. And just seeing so many of you here today, it's really, really inspiring to know that enough people care to spend their Saturday evening on Zoom, listening to, Chomsky, who's just going to be amazing, but come together in this space is really inspiring. So thank you so much for coming. And yeah, so excited to welcome Professor Noam Chomsky. I don't know really if he needs an introduction, but I'm going to give one just in case. Chomsky is a political activist, a social critic, a philosopher, a linguist, and a cognitive scientist from the United States. And his published work includes topics such as war, mass media, politics, and linguistics. And he continues to be outspoken and really, very inspirational to this day. And he's also created a number of linguistic theories, which are still foundational in modern day understanding. So, yeah, his work spans topics and countries and continents, and I think we'd be here all day or all week if we were going to talk through all of it. But just thank you so much for coming, Chomsky. And with that, I would just like now to hand over to you. Thank you so much. And please send your questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thanks very much. What is of utmost importance beyond the capacity of words to express, we all know. It's now or never. Now or never. That's the beginning and the end of the story. The latest IPCC report a couple of weeks ago minced no words. The evidence, it said, is unequivocal that any more delays will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity for a globally livable future. The human species is hurtling to destruction. On the present course, the planet will soon reach irreversible tipping points, then descend towards the collapse of organized human society with intolerable agony, bringing down much of life with us. Beetles and bacteria will doubtless multiply as other species decline steadily or disappear. That's one thing we know. It's now or never. Another thing we know is that the challenge can be met. We know the means. What is missing is will and commitment. You all are well aware of the details of how a livable environment is crumbling before our eyes. I'm not going to waste your time by rehearsing the all too familiar tale of woe. The task is to craft the proper means to address the crisis. What are the appropriate tactics? Well, 80 years of activism have taught me one lesson. My own tactical judgments are far from impeccable, understatement. So I don't have great trust in them, and nor should you, particularly those of you with extensive activist experience. So here I'll keep to some remarks on the challenges we face in trying to devise the most effective ways to proceed, to fend off disaster, and to create a much better world, as can be done. That should never be forgotten. Well, if an evil demon were seeking to torture the world of living beings, it could hardly have contrived circumstances more conducive to these goals than what we are now facing. Actually, the evil demon exists and is diligently designing the circumstances. It's political leadership around the world and institutional structures which are designed for self-annihilation. It's all real. We have to recognize and understand the grim reality. One new challenge is blazingly obvious. Vladimir Putin's criminal aggression is not only devastating Ukraine, it has also administered a severe blow to the efforts to save the planet. The euphoria in the executive offices of ExxonMobil, Chevron, others like them, that exceeds even the joy among their partners in destruction of life on Earth in the offices of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, other military producers, all ecstatic. The fossil fuel destroyers no longer have to be bothered by the complaints of silly environmentalists like you. Don't have to be worried any longer about what they call reputational risks. The worm has turned decisively. Now they are being lauded for saving civilization by filling their bulging pockets, by destroying the planet more effectively. They're even gloating very openly about grand new sources of destruction in Guyana that may rival the Gulf of Mexico, all to enthusiastic applause. Well, there is a window of opportunity to save human society. Putin's criminality and the Western reaction to it haven't succeeded in closing the window, but they have narrowed the opening and made the task, which was already difficult, they've made the task ahead considerably more challenging. Well, is there anything that can be done about it? No doubt. The United States is the world's leading oil producer. One possibility in the United States is to adopt the suggestion by economist Robert Holland, one of the leading analysts and activists on this area. He suggests that the US simply nationalize the fossil fuel industry and convert it to sustainable energy. Would that be too costly? No, not at all. He shows in some detail that it's a fraction, small fraction of the cost of bailing out financial institutions whose unimaginable wealth was under a limited threat from the COVID crisis. Well, a fraction of what was spent to bail them out would suffice to take over the fossil fuel industry. Would it be unprecedented? Not at all. In 2009, the Obama administration essentially nationalized the failing automotive industry. They bailed it out, handed it back to their former owners so they could produce what we don't need: more cars to poison the atmosphere while drivers fume in traffic jams. There was something that was not contemplated: handing it over to the workforce with assistance to produce what we do need: efficient mass transportation. That was unthinkable within our business-run doctrinal system. It was actually discussed, but only at the very remote margins where it's easily silenced. The doctrinal system is powerful, but it's not impregnable. There's a good illustration of that right now. Have a look at what's happening with coal mining in the United States. It's quite revealing. The United Mine Workers Union has agreed to a transitional program in which mine workers would be helped to find new and better employment in renewable energy and in closing the mines. Well, that didn't just happen. It's the result of substantial grassroots activism, carefully designed programs in which, in fact, Bob Pollan played a central role. The cost, again, is minimal, certainly in comparison with how the federal budget and tax systems are designed to enhance the exorbitant wealth and power of those who matter, the masters of mankind, as Adam Smith called them in his day, referring to the merchants and manufacturers of England. Well, that's the coal miners. They were blocked in this crucial endeavor by their own representative in Congress. Joe Manchin is a coal magnate, the leading recipient of fossil fuel money in Congress. And he insists on using all forms of energy, including those that will end us all while enriching the masters, who, of course, will be doomed as well. That's one illustration of the institutional obstacles in the way of escape, from disaster. Well, Manchin happens to be a Democrat. What about the Republicans? A look at them tells us a good deal more about the institutional obstacles that have to be faced. The Republicans are very likely to come to power in November, a couple of months from now. They will surely carry forward their quite open, undisguised efforts to try to gain a permanent hold on power by a white supremacist, Christian nationalist, proto-fascist party that is wholly dedicated to service to extreme wealth and corporate power. That's no exaggeration. There are international comparisons which show that in attitudes and programs, the Republican Party today ranks alongside the far-right parties in Europe with neo-fascist origins. The party is also 100% denialist on climate. That's rigidly, no exceptions tolerated. Quite interestingly, it has not always been so, and the transition tells us a lot about the institutional challenges to survival. So let's have a quick look. In 2008, the Republican candidate for president, John McCain, had a climate plank in his program. Wasn't much, but was at least something. 2008 Republican legislators were also beginning to toy with similar efforts. Well, the Koch brothers energy conglomerate got word of this, and they quickly leaped into action. For years, they had been working overtime to ensure that Republicans fully supported free use of fossil fuels and they were not going to tolerate this deviation from total subordination to their interests. They launched a huge juggernaut: bribes, threats, massive lobbying, fake citizens groups, astroturfing. In no time, all Republican leaders capitulated totally. The last Republican primary was 2016. All the top leaders of the Republican Party, every single one, either flatly denied that global warming is happening or said, maybe it is, but we're not going to do anything about it. The victor, Donald Trump, went all out for maximizing the use of fossil fuels, including the most dangerous of them, and dismantling regulations that might protect the environment and the population. Well, Trump owns the party, literally. The party is very likely to be coming back to total control of the government. It's not any government, it's the government of the most powerful country in human history. That's no joke for our sad world. Well, one effect of the treachery of leadership is that among the population, those who either are Republicans or lean Republican, only 20% regard global warming as a top priority. It's only the most critical problem that humans have ever faced. So why pay attention? So their leaders and their media echo chambers tell them all the time, and it's having an effect. Well, that's the challenge in the world dominant power, which to an unusual extent is business run. It's a fact that has many consequences. And in this case, the suicidal properties of unconstrained capitalist institutions are dramatically clear. There have been improvements. Young activists have made a tremendous difference. We see that, in fact, as we meet. Yesterday and today, they've been leading climate demonstrations in many cities in the country. That's significant. It's not the first time. I'll mention one earlier achievement. A couple of years ago, young activists from the Sunrise Movement occupied the offices of congressional representatives, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Well, normally they would have simply been thrown out by the Capitol Police. Not in this case, however. They were joined by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, young representative who was swept in the Bernie Sanders wave. They were able to make their point vividly, and they went on, joining with others like them to compel, and I stress compel because it wasn't easy, to compel the Democratic Party to adopt a moderately decent climate plank in Biden's program. Not perfect, but better than anything that had preceded. Meanwhile, Representative Ocasio-Cortez joined with Ed Markey. He's a senior senator from Massachusetts who'd long been concerned with environmental issues. They introduced a congressional resolution that provides a detailed and very realistic program for dealing with the climate emergency. The resolution, not legislation, but it can advance to the level of legislation with more intense popular activism. Well, Biden's program, climate program, it was limited, but it had many quite positive aspects. Every single one of them was killed entirely by 100% rock solid Republican opposition. That's the party that's coming to power, joined by a couple of right-wing Democrats like Hanson. Again, the roots are institutional, not individual, and they're not going to be easy to overcome. But as these examples illustrate, things can be done to chip away at it. Well, more generally, capitalism, unconstrained capitalism, is simply a suicide pact. It's quite astonishing to see what's happening now. Policies on an existential threat like climate change have to be shaped so as to bribe the masters, not to destroy us all. You can't just carry out the policies through a popular agreement that we want to save ourselves. No, you have to shape the policies to bribe the masters so that maybe they'll cooperate a little. While at the same time, they pursue what Adam Smith called the vile maxim of the masters of mankind: all for ourselves, nothing for anyone else. Well, we just, in our depraved society, we have to accept that and see if we can somehow bribe them to pursue their vile maxim while cooperating and saving the earth from destruction. Well, the vile maxim has been somewhat eroded over the years by militant popular action, but it remains in the background with immense power over policy, even over systems of beliefs and attitudes. That's no novel insight. You all know it. Well, around the world, circumstances vary. Tactics have to be carefully designed in light of existing circumstances. That's no easy task. Again, no novel insight. Well, let's finally step back a little and view what's happening on Earth from a broader perspective. I'm sure you're familiar with Enrico Fermi's famous paradox. Put simply, it's the question, where are they? Fermi was a distinguished astrophysicist. He knew very well that there are a huge number of planets that have the conditions to sustain life and higher intelligence, all within reach of possible contact. So, but with the most assiduous search, we can find no trace of their existence. So where are they? That's the paradox. Well, one answer that has been seriously proposed and cannot be dismissed is that higher intelligence has developed innumerable times, but it has proven to be lethal. It has discovered the means of self-annihilation, but has not been able to develop the moral capacity to prevent it. Perhaps that's even an inherent feature of what we call higher intelligence. Well, we are now engaged in an experiment to test this thesis. to determine whether this principle holds of modern humans, of us. We are a very recent arrival on Earth, maybe 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. It's a flick of an eye in evolutionary time. We don't have a lot of time to find the answer. Not find, more precisely, to determine the answer. And we're going to do that one way or another. That's unavoidable. We will determine the answer one way or another. More accurately, you will determine the answer. Like it or not, fate has placed you in a position where you will determine whether we march on to disaster or whether the human species and much other life on Earth can be saved from a terrible, indescribable fate. The means are available. They are known. You're in the lead in determining whether human higher intelligence is capable of developing the moral capacity to overcome the drive for self-annihilation, which manifests itself in so many ways. It's an incredible challenge. There's been nothing like it in human history, which will proceed to an inglorious end unless you and people like you can find the way to take the lead in facing and overcoming the challenges that lie before us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring. I've been writing down lots of things that you were saying. Yeah, just thank you so much for your time and just your knowledge and everything. It's just so astounding. And thank you for keeping on going throughout your life, even with all the challenges and horrendous things you must have witnessed. You're still going and you're still here to speak the truth. So just thank you so much for that. We're now going to, some people have been submitting questions whilst you've been talking. Also, if anyone here has any questions, please send them to the co-host, who's called Questions for Chomsky. It will be in the chat, and then send your questions there so we can ask them. So I'm just going to ask some now. I hope that's okay. And let me know if you can't hear me. Okay, so someone from Facebook, Alexandra Anderson Nuns, said, there is much evidence to show that transformational change can be achieved through emotional and creative means rather than informative or alarmist ones. Would you say tapping into a common ground of love for life and the planet is a message which might reach people quickly enough to bring awakening in the Western world? So I guess the question is, is an approach based in like collective love for our planet better than alarmist messaging?
Well, as I said, 80 years of activism have taught me that my own tactical judgments are not all that great. So if this can be done, if this reaches people, pursue it. Whatever reaches people, we have to pursue in their terms. Can't lecture to them. Every activist knows you have to start where people are. One thing that has proven very effective in many areas is to try to win small victories. So let me just give you an example from another domain. Most of my life I spent in Boston. It's a very poor area in Boston, which is mostly immigrants. They meet in English high school. which is called English high school because nobody speaks English. They speak a dozen other languages because they're all recent immigrants. They're very hopeless, way at the bottom level of society. Some community organizers began to work there. They started with something extremely simple. Let's see if a group of mothers can get together and appeal to the city council to put up a traffic light at a street where their kids cross to go to school. They thought it was impossible. You can't fight City Hall. But they tried, and they won. And that said, hey, we can do something. Then they went on to other things. Ended up being one of the most activist communities in the city, achieving all kinds of things, far-reaching ones. That's the way things progress. Most people are just hopeless. These problems are way beyond us. We can't deal with those big powers up there. Well, you have to break through. You can deal with them. So start with something you can do. Achieve it. You see, you do have power. Extend it. Now, we don't have a lot of time. We don't have 50 years to experiment with this. So the devices have to be geared to breaking the spell of helplessness and at the same time moving on without too much delay to addressing the really serious issues. Can we do that? That's up to people who are organizing in the streets to determine. We better be able to do it or we're all finished.
Thank you very much. Okay, next question. Someone says, Chomsky, in your book, Manufacturing Consent, your book, Manufacturing Consent, is enlightening and relevant to the climate crisis. What is the way around billionaires owning media promoting their narrow interests in terms of the climate crisis?
We all know the answers. Incidentally, it's not a new question. It was raised by George Orwell in an essay that you probably haven't read because it was suppressed. It was found 30 years after it was written in his unpublished papers. It's the introduction to Animal Farm. Sure, you've all read Animal Farm. That was permissible. It was a satire on the totalitarian enemy. In the introduction to Animal Farm, he tells the people of England, you shouldn't feel so self-righteous. In England, he says, free England, unpopular ideas can be suppressed without the use of force. And he goes on to give some examples. He gives a couple of reasons. One is what this question raises. One way this happens is the press is owned by wealthy men who have every interest in wanting certain ideas to be suppressed. Your question. That was 1944, addressing free England in an essay that was suppressed. Well, he actually gave another reason, which I think is more interesting. He said another way this happens is basically with a good education. You've gone to the best schools, you got a degree at Oxford and Cambridge. You have instilled into you the understanding that there are certain things it wouldn't do to say. We can add, it wouldn't even do to think. Well, you can think back to your own experiences. I think you can find evidence of that. Have to break through it. How do you do it? A lot of ways. Not easy. For one thing, you can construct alternative media. It used to be very hard. Now it's pretty easy. The ability to construct alternative media institutions has greatly expanded. So there are opportunities. The other thing you can do is exert pressure on the mainstream media. And this can be very effective. I'm not a great admirer of the mainstream media, but they are much better than they were 40 or 50 years ago. And the reason is the activist movements of the 1960s and their aftermath, which greatly civilized the society. That's why they're so condemned in the mainstream. They greatly civilized the society. They made it possible to open up and discuss issues that were completely under the rug earlier in the universities, in the media, the general culture. And many of the people now writing in journals came out of that experience. And you can see the impact. If there were time, I could give you examples, but you can definitely see the impact. So say in the New York Times, the first newspaper I read in the morning, you can read columns now on reporting that would have been unimaginable a couple of years ago. Well, still pretty rotten, but that's a break. So there are things you can do. We know the answers. What's missing is just the commitment to carry out what we know can be done.
Thank you so much. Clara Wood asks, with so many people in the West in a consumeristic and passive mentality, how do you suggest that we get through to them?
I think we can approach people where they are and convince them. I don't think it's very hard. Take the example that I just mentioned. Is it more fun to sit in a traffic jam for an hour while trying to get to work, or to take efficient mass transportation that'll get you there in 15 minutes while you can be reading a newspaper or having a cup of coffee? That's a choice. It's a choice that's directly in people's lives. I mean, most of my life, till very recently, I lived in Boston, Massachusetts. Happened to live in a suburb, professional suburb, very liberal. Everyone voted the right way, except on one issue. They would not permit mass public transportation to reach the suburb. They prefer to sit in a traffic jam for an hour and a half to get to Boston. They prefer that than to allow the possibility that some Black kid from downtown might walk around the town center. That's generalized all over the place. Well, I think you can break through that kind of thing, and it shows up all over. There are better things to do, better ways of living than piling yourself up with consumer goods that you don't know what to do with. This is all over the place. As you probably know, about 30 years ago, the advertising industry, huge industry, tries to control your lives. About 30 years ago, they discovered that there's a sector of the population that's not being reached by advertising. So they better do something about it. That sector is young children. Now, young children don't have any money, but the advertising industry realized that they can nag their parents. They can nag their parents saying, I just saw this great thing on kiddie television. I have to have it or I'm going to die. So the parents will go out and buy some $400 bit of nonsense, which the kid will look at for 5 minutes and throw away. They realize this. And a whole academic profession developed, literally, in applied psychology about different kinds of nagging and how to stimulate various kinds of nagging. Well, the kid would be much happier with something much simpler than a lot of junk that they're going to throw away. And the same is true of all of our lives. I think people can come to understand that, but you have to lift the veil. Otherwise, it's not going to be seen. The easy, natural thing is just to follow the crowd. Do what everybody else is doing. Don't ask any questions, accept dominant ideology. That's what organizers and activists are about. Try to lift the veil. Ask people whether there isn't something better. And there is a lot of better things. I think people can come to understand that. Actually, we see it all over the place, just spontaneously. So take the COVID crisis. One of the very interesting things that happened during the COVID crisis was that all over the place in the poorest neighborhoods, people became self-organized to try to help each other. So there's some guy stuck in an apartment who can't get out for food. Let's bring him some food. Other things like this. Sometimes this happened in the most astonishing ways. You can learn a lot from it. So take Rio de Janeiro, which happens to be where my wife Valeria comes from. There are miserable slums there, favelas they're called, unbelievably miserable slums, very dangerous places. They're all run by criminal gangs in the drug racket. Police are afraid to go in. And when they do come in, they slaughter people. Well, what happened during the COVID crisis? You can't tell people to get washed. They don't have water. What happened was the criminal gangs began to organize the favelas. They ran them, they organized them into self-mutual aid organizations where you bring water to people who don't have it in their home. And it was pretty successful. Well, things like that were happening all over. Localism in farm products, for example, cooperatives, all sorts of things. These just spring up because they're very natural to people. When the veil is lifted, just comes. Well, activists can help with that. And same on consumerism. It's not our nature. If it was our nature, industry wouldn't be spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year, billions of dollars a year to try to force us into this mold. They would just say, here's the products. If you don't like them, don't buy them. Well, they don't do that. And the reason is because they know that the power is actually in your hands, not in their hands, if you make use of it.
Thank you so much. That was really, really inspiring. So on that, somebody says, how can we succeed in communicating how serious the climate crisis is without overloading people scientific facts on one side or being dismissed as alarmist on the other? So basically, yeah, what's the best way we communicate seriousness of climate change to people who don't yet quite understand?
Well, you're right. Take the United States, where 80% of Republicans don't think it's an urgent crisis. Sorry about my dog. There's no point coming to them with a ton of scientific information. They don't trust science. They've been taught that science is just a way of controlling them and by elitists who don't care about them. So you start by breaking through that, saying, yeah, we do care about you. we care about the fact that you're going to be living underwater and your children will be living underwater, that they're going to be dying from pollution, that there's going to be fires raging which are going to destroy your home. Let's talk about what's right in front of them. As I said, I live in Arizona, which is what's called, many people just don't believe in any of this right-wing state, but they do see that forest fires are getting to the point where they're uncontrollable, where it's usually late in the summer, it's already started. Last summer, we could see the fires a couple of miles from where we live. Fortunately, they didn't get to us. There was a highway in the middle between us, stopped there. But all of this is right in people's lives. They care about their children. They don't want their children to be living in a world that's disappearing, crumbling. All of this can be brought to people, not by reading the IPCC report, they don't know anything about that, but just by talking about what's in front of you, which is serious enough, and then make it clear it's not an accident. This is for serious reasons. It's going to go on. You can't wish it away. If it's not easy, but I think these tests can be overcome. It's kind of like trying to get people to break out of the feeling of helplessness. Can be done, has been done. That's what good organizers and activists are skilled in carrying out, often very effectively. I mean, the people who are taking part in the demonstrations today in the United States, they weren't doing it a couple of years ago. Now they're doing it. It broke through, can break through more widely.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think that's a really good thing to remember, is that even though it might not seem it, more people are joining and being inspired, yeah, to take this action. Lucia Harrington asks, and this will be an interesting one to hear your response on. They said, I'm not sure what they completely mean by this, but they said, are anarchist styles of organizing equipped for combating the climate crisis?
Organizing I didn't catch the word.
Sorry.
Organizing what?
No, are anarchist styles of organizing equipped for combating the climate crisis?
Oh. I think they're the only methods that work. Authoritarian methods just don't work. If you come and tell people you got to do this because the scientists say so, they're not going to listen to you. If you come to people and say, look, we're working together to try to create a better world for you and your children, here are some ways in which we can do it, then you can reach people. And while doing it, you can get them to have a look at the scientific papers. You know, they're not quantum physics. They can be read. They can be read at an elementary level. Actually, the people who in power know this. It's worth paying attention to them. So in the United States right now, there's a major effort by the Republican Party and the right wing to stop discussion in the schools, to block discussion among young people in the schools of anything related to climate, to race, to American history. You have to impose a totalitarian discipline in which things can't even be discussed. And they have a point. If you allow things to be discussed, people will think and reach conclusions. So therefore, dozens of states now are simply banning discussion. State of Florida, which happens to be in the hands of an ultra-right governor who may be running for president soon, just banned about 40% of mathematics texts for children, mathematics texts, because they found some indirect reference there to intolerable topics like discrimination or climate or something like that. They know what they're doing. They're not stupid. And we should pay attention and do the opposite. Okay.
Thank you so much. Dee or Di has asked, and I think might be a good question to end on. They said, what is your wish that each person on this call chooses to do next?
What I would wish is that each of you ask yourself the most important question. What can I do where I am, where I live, with the capabilities I have, with the talents I have? And it's going to be different answers for different people. We're all different. There are things I used to do and I just can't do anymore. I used to take part in civil disobedience, get arrested, and spend a couple of days in jail for what it was worth. I just can't do that anymore, so I do other things. And each of you can ask yourself the same question. How can I make a difference wherever I am? Maybe it's a small difference, but these things multiply very quickly. That's the only thing I know.
Thank you so much. That was really, really, really powerful way to end those questions. And yeah, just to repeat that, you said, yeah, ask yourself what I can do where I am, where I live, with the capabilities I have. I think that is so important that we all remember that, and we share that with people who think that they can't do anything or they can't do enough. Remember that we all can do something. So yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time today, Noam. It's been just really, really amazing and inspiring, and just such a unique opportunity to have you here and all these people who have come together to hear you speak is really just amazing. And just thank you for basically dedicating your whole life to try to make the world a better place. It's really just an inspiration. So yeah, thank you so much. We're now going to hear from Liam Norton from Just Stop Oil. So Professor Chomsky, you're very welcome to stay, but we understand if you have to go, or yeah, maybe you need to see your dog or anything. But yeah, thank you so much for coming today. Really, really appreciate it, and just keep fighting a good fight.
Very much for all you're doing, and I'm afraid I have to leave and go off to the next one.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. Liam, over to you.
Cheers, Miranda. Hello, everybody. My name's Liam Norton. I was part of the Insulate Britain campaign, and also used to be involved with Extinction Rebellion before that. I used to read a lot of Noam Chomsky when I was growing up, like in my late teens, early 20s, and in my 20s and stuff. Well, all the way through, really. And I remember reading in 2015, in about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I remember reading a book, and he was talking about the two greatest threats to human civilization. And he said that they were climate change and nuclear war. And in 2015, I think I was in quite, a lot of denial in terms of the climate stuff. I was like, ignorance was bliss, really, for me. The Al Gore film came out and I didn't want to watch it. I just purposefully like kept it out of range of my consciousness, I suppose. And I think denial is like a really powerful human driver. And at the time I thought it was quite an outlandish statement. And now here I am. I've spent the last 3 years involved in climate activism, and been arrested many times, done things that I never thought I would have dreamt of. And now we're at this point where a few months ago, nuclear war was being discussed, as a real possibility. So it just goes to show the prescience of like what Noam, where he's at in what he's saying. And he said in this talk that we just heard that, it's no joke. That's what he said. And I don't know, as Miranda said, he's a leader in linguistics. He's got I think there's there's a field in linguistics that's named after Chomsky because of his work in that area. And I often thought, what is that connection to linguistics and political thought and commentary? How did those two intersect? And I often used to think, I don't know, maybe this isn't true, but his sort of understanding of language and how words mean certain things, that there's this connection to truth. There's this idea that if you say a word, it means something. And as we know, Noam's work is massively about highlighting lies and hypocrisy of governments, in terms of saying one thing and doing completely the opposite. And I think what we should be talking about tonight is what Noam was this idea of truth, and that's what we're going to try and talk a little bit about tonight, some truth. So what else? He also said that evil doesn't even begin to describe what's going on at the moment. He said that evil demon exists. So there's this strong connection to criminality that as well here, as well as evil. What's going on here is fucking criminal. That's what ultimately we're trying to sort of express here at this point in history, that the biggest act of criminality is going on by governments around the world at this point in history. And yesterday, the Kwasi Kwarteng is a UK minister for business, energy and industrial strategy here in the UK. And he said this yesterday. He said that I welcome BP UK's plans, BP UK obviously being a major oil and gas corporation. I welcome BP UK's plans to develop the Murlach field in the North Sea. The transition to cheap, clean power can't happen overnight. We'll need oil and gas for decades. That is a matter of fact. I'd much rather we source more of our gas domestically. And one of my friends said of this, that this statement should be read out at the criminal trials of the people that are currently in the UK government. And of course, governments all over the world are complicit in this kind of treachery. And this statement is a clear indication that there is a declaration of war happening at this time upon the small island states and the poor nations of the global south, who are going to experience unimaginable horror from this recklessness that we're currently seeing from these governments. And Noam also said that this is happening globally. He talked about gloating about new sources of destruction in oil fields in Guyana, which again is like can completely destroy the population that are living there. They're kind of irrelevant to these ambitions of the oil and gas companies, and it is greed and criminality that is ultimately what is going on. And we always talk in these kind of talks that we do about the situation, and it's like getting really tiring. You know, I'm not going to give you the sort of like conversation article, the 1.5 degrees is lost. You know, loads of you have been to these talks time and time again where we just say the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm not prepared to do it again tonight. We all know that Paris is lost, and we all know what we need to do about it. That just a little indication of what's going on right now in the last sort of few weeks. Climate change is affecting the production of maize and wheat, and it will affect crop yields really badly as early as 2030, according to a new NASA study published in the journal Nature Food. We're currently seeing an extreme heat wave in India and Pakistan at this point in time. We've had the hottest March in 122 years, and it has lowered wheat harvests by at least 15 to 20%, say the farmers in Uttar Pradesh. So it's an absolutely catastrophic situation for the farmers who are already having a really difficult time there, as we know. A month ago, we had temperatures 30 degrees C above average in the Arctic and 40 degrees C above average in the Antarctic. The situation is like, I mean, I'm an electrician, I'm not a scientist, and I look at these numbers and I'm infuriated with journalists, with academics, with people that should be able to look at these fucking numbers and just think, what the hell is going on? It is beyond enraging to somebody like me who hasn't even been to university, and I can look at numbers and work it out. It's beyond bad what the situation is at this point in time. And it's also clear, as we've been saying, many of you will have come to talks like this for the last year, where we talk about billions of people being displaced. How many times do we need to keep saying it? How many times do we need to keep repeating the same things on calls like this? Let's talk about the truth of what that means. It means war, doesn't it? We say this every time, don't we? We say mass starvation. We say unimaginable horror. We say it every single time. And we know what it looks like. It looks like the war and the horror that we saw in the 20th century, in the First and Second World Wars, in Vietnam, and other conflicts that happened around the world. We know what it looks like. And in the words of Gabby Ditton, who's been a prominent Just Stop Oil supporter, she said, outrage doesn't even begin to cover how we should feel about this. Outrage doesn't even begin to cover how we should feel about this. Governments around the world want us to die quietly. Well, fuck that shit. That's what she said. And I agree with her. We're at risk now of losing it all. All of the work that Noam Chomsky has done that brought you to this call, all the work, all the civil rights, the anti-war campaigns in Vietnam, you know, the legendary things that he has written in his career. We are at risk of losing everything, losing it all, if we do not act right now at this point in time. I remember, again, another thing that Noam said in an interview once somewhere, in a book or in an interview, describing the great number of heroic, nameless people who lost their lives or went through the most unbelievably traumatic experiences during the civil rights movement in America during the 1960s. The activists who are rarely talked about and they're rarely remembered. But there was many of them, and they were called to do something at that point in time. And why was it? Why did those people become prepared to risk their lives, to risk everything? What was the reason that people did that? I'll leave you to think about what the answer to that question is. Because the truth is now that we do need a miracle. Noam said that the task is even more difficult now war is raging in Ukraine. We need potentially many more people to engage in the kind of non-violent civil resistance we saw during the civil rights movement in America and other campaigns. We need many more than that, and we need them now. We need them all right now. So I think what we want to say here is, like, some of you might have gone already now, Noam's gone, but please, if you're joining these calls or any in the future, and you're coming to them with absolutely no intention of joining these breakout rooms and taking part in the campaigns that we're describing, then please don't bother coming. Please don't bother, because that's what we're here to do now. We're here to organize and get together so that we can really do something and to do what we can do, as Noam was talking about. Let us be clear that the political systems around the world are creaking at the seams. We're seeing it all over the world in different governments. We can totally change the course of history in the next few years. We can do it. It's completely possible. And what we're here to say is that we have to do this. We have no choice. It is possible, and we have to do it. Noam said that we have the solutions to change course. We will determine the answer. You will determine the answer. Can the human race be saved from an indescribable fate? Is higher human intelligence able to find the moral resources to combat the evil that we are currently facing? He said that earlier on tonight. And that's the question that we're posing to you this evening. There has been no challenge like this in human history. It is our destiny to be alive at this time and to try and play our part in doing what is right at this time in history as well. So we need to take the lead to overcome the challenges we face. We have the power, as Noam said. We just need to know how to use it. We also heard him talking about achieving small victories, and the Just Stop Oil campaign, on one sense, it's a huge victory in terms of stopping all new future fossil fuel licenses. But in the context of the climate crisis and catastrophe that we currently face, it is a small victory. And again, it is totally winnable. During the campaign last month, it was on the cusp. It was like that far away from succeeding in terms of bringing about disruption that might force the government to the negotiating table. Double the amount of numbers of people that are taking part, and it is totally possible that the Just Stop Oil Coalition can win. And one of the reasons for that is because it's such a mainstream demand as well. Even though the governments are completely corrupt and unable to pass it through, you know, we've got the UN, the International Energy Agency, more and more people, hundreds of NGOs and environmental organizations are on board with this demand, and it is a mainstream demand. So it's completely possible that we can get the victory if we continue taking action during the campaign. So we've got a couple of people that have been taking part in civil resistance campaigns. We've got at least 9 civil resistance campaigns engaged in action at this time around the world. There's some really inspiring stuff going on in Europe, in America, in Canada, in Australia, and all kinds of other places around the world as well. So this is happening now, and wherever you are in the world, please do consider doing, as Noam said, whatever you can do, and look honestly into your heart before you answer that question. Cool. I'll pass back to Miranda now. Maybe you'll introduce the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liam, and thank you for giving your time and energy. It's very inspiring as always. So yeah, as Liam said, we're now going to hear from two people who have been taking action. First, Cressy from Just Stop Oil in the UK, and secondly, from John from Declare Emergency in the US. And then after this, we're going to go into smaller rooms so we can discuss our own action going forward. And I really urge you all, please, to stay and to come into those groups and to have these discussions, because as Liam said, we really don't have time anymore to just be here to listen and then to leave and step back from the action. We need you all to stand together, because the future is, as we know, it's looking dire, but there's so much hope in this community that we have here. So please, I'd ask you, if you have time, please stay for the rest of this call. Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll now pass to Cressy from Just Stop Oil. Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda. So my name is Cressy. I am 20 years old. Over the last few years, my awareness of the climate crisis has got progressively deeper. And with that, I have found that my drive to take action has got stronger. I began thinking of climate activism as a bit of a hobby. I quite enjoyed waving my banners and marching. But as I say, I'm constantly reaching new levels of awareness and emotional connection with what is going on around me. And now I just find myself unable to stand by as the hours and the days and the weeks go by, knowing that we have such a short time left. I simply have to do something. So I'm a 20-year-old. I haven't got a degree. I have only been able to vote for 2 years, and you might think I'm don't have a lot to offer, and I believe that for quite a long time as well. I still feel quite small sometimes when faced with the massive powers of the state and the oil corporations and the numerous other bodies which have so much power behind them. However, I took part in the Just Stop Oil campaign over the Easter period, and I realized that I have so much power. I have so much power because I have a physical body and a liberty which I can choose to put at risk And it was hard. It was hard. The Just Stop Oil campaign. It was mentally and physically exhausting. However, whilst taking part in the actions, I was with somebody else on one particular action who said to me, this was a long action. We'd been there for a long time, and I was getting exhausted. And the person next to me just kept on whispering, "We are making history. We are making history." And that got me through, because what else? What is the alternative right now? There is no alternative. I recently watched I recently watched Don't Look Up, and I'm sure many of you will have seen it. I was particularly struck by at the very end when these two scientists who have been trying desperately to tell the world that there's an Earth-destroying comet ploughing towards the planet, and the governments have not taken action, and they are sitting around this table waiting for the comet to arrive. And one of the scientists' family members asked them, what are you grateful for? And the scientist said, "I'm grateful that we tried." Well, I'm trying now. God, am I trying? Because there is no alternative, right? I cannot live with the idea that the world will crumble and I haven't done everything that I can to save it. And I know lots of other people feel the same way, which is why there are amazing movements around the world now, internationally, all these people realizing this is the moment, that we can't hold back any longer. In the same way that I've realized that I have a lot of power, every single human being on this planet has immense power, and collectively, that power is just multiplied. So that's all I got to say this evening. I'm very grateful that everyone has come, and I hope that everyone will realize just how much power they do have.
Thank you very much, Cressy, for sharing those words. Yeah, thank you. And now we're going to hear from John, who's based in the US, from the group Declare Emergency.
Hi, everyone. I want to say thank you so much to everyone that's on this call. Thank you to the beautiful things that you just said, Cressy, and Liam and Noam. This is a beautiful call to be a part of. Yeah, I'm John. I am 26. I'm originally from California, and I've been doing civil resistance and civil disobedience for the climates for about 8 months now. And I'm working on a group called Declare Emergency. We were inspired by Insulate Britain, along with many other people around the world, by seeing what was happening over there. I was following it like every single day. I was watching videos on YouTube, and I was watching the Twitter feed and everything. And it was tremendously inspiring to see people refusing to back down, refusing to just go along and be complicit with this system. And it had a huge impact on me, and it really changed my life. And I decided to try to do the same thing as well. I grew up in a religious fundamentalist, from a religious fundamentalist background, and I didn't think that I had to like worry about the climate because I thought that God was going to solve it. You know, He was going to take care of it, even if it was a problem. But once I started really looking into the situation and seeing how horrific and serious it was, I realized that if there is a God, He would want us to do something about it. He wouldn't just want us to allow His creation to collapse. So I realized that I was suppressing terror, that I at some level knew what was happening, but I wasn't allowing myself to think about it. And that was in like 2020 was when I kind of realized how serious the situation was. And afterwards, I descended into like a depression. I wouldn't go out. I, just was completely consumed in despair. And I would like to suggest that that is totally rational, and it's maybe even a good thing for people to experience that level of depression and fear for the future. Because when I came out of it, I was ready to act. And I think that many people have had the same experience. In 2018, a city not far from where I grew up burned to the ground, and I would drive back through for work, and I would meet people who had lost everything in the fires, and it just lit a huge anger within me. And I think that anger also is really important in the work that we're doing, to feel that anger for the situation and to be ready to act. So since August of last year, I've been arrested 11 times, and I've spent almost 2 weeks in jail. And it has been really, really hard, really difficult going out into traffic, blocking highways, not sure if the drivers are going to assault us. But that's like nothing in comparison with what we're facing. It's like the smallest sacrifice in comparison with what the collapse of everything that we care about. So declare emergency. We are demanding that Biden declare a climate emergency. It's the simplest demand. It's like the most basic thing that he could do. It's the most basic thing for any government to tell the public the reality of what we're facing. Let's see, what else can I say? I think I'm still really consumed with like despair regularly because of the situation that we're in, and that it was brought about by decisions that I had nothing to do with, that the people on this call didn't decide to turn on the taps of oil and destroy our civilization. But I really like a quote from an existentialist philosopher, Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, and he wrote that freedom is what we do with what is done to us. And this situation has been put on us. People in our 20s and younger, we don't have really a future, and that has been done to us. But we do have the freedom to do something about it now. And I really liked what Cressy had mentioned about that you have we have the choice, we have the freedom to put our liberty at risk. And that is a choice that we can make that potentially will have long-lasting impacts. So I think the positive things about what we're doing is that for the first time, I feel like I'm in a community of people who are engaged and understand the situation and are prepared to act. And this is like a global community. I feel like I haven't spoken personally to many people on this call, but I feel like I already know you because I followed what you all have been doing. And I would say that when you engage in this work, you feel a connection to other people who are also doing the same thing. And you know that you're all working for the same goal, in the same direction, working to try to save humanity, basically. And I would say also that it does make the despair easier to live with. And I think for me personally, I couldn't live with myself if I wasn't doing this, or if I wasn't doing something like this. And I think that there's a lot of people like that also. So yeah, I would like to encourage everyone, especially if you're from the United States, like Chomsky was saying, this is the most important country in the whole world because of the power that this country has. So that means that our responsibility here in America and throughout Western countries, but especially here, is like so much higher. And people from around the world are doing this civil resistance and engaging in it. But if it doesn't happen here, then like everything is fucked. So if you're from America, please reach out to Just Stop Oil, go to declareemergency.org, come and join us, because we have a massive responsibility. And if we fuck it up, we are going to mess it up for the entire world. So yeah, I would like to encourage everyone to get involved in that, or in the civil resistance group that is from the country that you're in. We're in about 9 countries now. So yeah, please get involved. And thank you again so much to everyone. I'll pass it back to Miranda.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, that was really, really inspiring to hear that you were inspired by Interlake Britain to take action. And I'm sure the action that you're taking will inspire others to do the same thing. I've seen pictures and videos from it, and it is really, really, yeah, just amazing. And also, I didn't actually know before I'd seen you guys doing this action that the United States hasn't declared a climate emergency. I thought that would have happened quite a while ago. I know obviously under Trump it would have been different, but I thought that the time for that had kind of passed, but clearly not. So yeah, thank you very, very much for taking that action and bringing, it's just, I can't believe we're having to actually ask for such a simple demand when, okay, so for everyone who's watching on the Facebook and the YouTube live stream, we're almost at the end now. And yeah, we just really hope that you've been inspired by what you've heard and what you've seen. And if you have now, we really, really need you to step up and to take action. So please fill in the Google form, which you'll find in the comments box, and take the time to fill that out, to take action, to donate money and or to organize a talk in your area, to organize a tool to come together with your local community, to take action so we can have a better future. Yeah, thank you so much for watching.
I so wish I didn't have to be doing this. This is really hard. I've got handcuffs on, but I'm not a criminal. I'm trying to safeguard the future.
They can take away my liberty. They can take away my freedom. They can choose to ignore the alarm we are sounding on the climate crisis, but they cannot take away our courage. to not be a bystander, to join us in saying no new oil. No one must be left behind.